The door of the great bedroom opened at midnight, and a woman Amarachi had never seen in her life was standing in it. Amara was 19 years old, my people, and it was her first night in the mansion of the man she had married that very morning, Chief Obiora, a billionaire more than twice her age. She was sitting on the very edge of an enormous bed, in a room larger than the whole house she had grown up in, still in her wedding clothes because she had been too frightened to take them off, when the door swung open without a knock. And there in the doorway stood a woman, not young, perhaps 60, beautifully dressed, straight of back, with a face that had once been very lovely and was now cut deep with something the girl could not yet name. And Amara's heart slammed in her chest because she did not know this woman, a servant, an intruder, some furious relative come to curse the young bride. And she opened her mouth to cry out, and the woman lifted one hand gently and said,
"Do not worry.
Do not scream. I am not here to hurt
You are safe here.
My name is Nneka. 30 years ago, I sat exactly where you are sitting now, on that same bed, in a dress like that one, 19 years old and shaking, on my first night as the wife of Chief Obiora. I am his first wife, child. The world was told I was dead. I am not dead. And I have opened this door tonight for one reason only, to tell you everything he will spend the rest of your life making certain you never learn. Sit. We do not have long before he comes. My people, come closer and sit down, because the door that opened at midnight in that great bedroom was not, as you might think, the beginning of a young wife's nightmare. It was the beginning of her rescue. And before this one night is over, two women a whole lifetime apart, the discarded old wife and the frightened new one, are going to do the single thing the most powerful man in that city never, in 30 years, once imagined they would do. But first you must understand how a 19-year-old girl came to be sitting on a billionaire's bed at all. Because it was not greed, my people, whatever the whole city was whispering that night. It was the exact opposite of greed. It was love, and it was a trap. Let me tell you about Amarachi, and how she came to marry a man old enough to be her grandfather. Amara was the eldest daughter of a good poor family. Her father, a decent and gentle man, had run a small business, nothing grand, a modest thing that fed them and paid the school fees, honest work. And he had done what small men do when they wish to grow. He had taken a loan. And for a while all was well. And then, my people, the loan went bad in a way that was not an accident, though it would be a long time before anyone understood that. The terms shifted, debts were bought and sold over the family's head, and one day Amara's father discovered that every naira he owed in the whole world had somehow come to be owned by a single man, a great and powerful chief, and that this chief was now calling all of it due at once, in full, immediately, or he would take the business, the house, everything, and see the father jailed for debt on top of it. The family was destroyed. A gentle father wept at his own table, a mother went grey overnight, younger children did not understand why. And into that ruin, my people, came the chief himself, not as a creditor, but wearing the mask of a savior. He came to their broken home, and he was gracious and sorrowful and kind, and he said that he had not realized the debt had fallen on such good people, and that he wished there was something he could do. And then, delicately, as though the thought had only just occurred to him, he mentioned that he had seen their eldest daughter Amara at the market, and that she was a fine, respectful young woman, and that, well, if she were to consent to be his wife, he would of course consider the entire debt a family matter, forgiven, erased, and he would set her family up in comfort for life besides. Do you see the trap, my people? Do you see how it was built? He had not fallen in love with a girl. He had manufactured a debt, crushed a family with it, and then offered that family their own survival in exchange for their daughter. It was a purchase dressed as a rescue, and Amara, 19 years old, watching her father shrink into himself, watching her mother's fear, knowing her younger siblings would be thrown into the street, Amara did the arithmetic that a good eldest daughter does, her one life against the survival of everyone she loved, and she said yes, not for money, not for the mansion. She walked into that marriage as a young woman walks into a fire to pull her family out of it, as a sacrifice, my people, the oldest and most misread sacrifice there is. And do you know what the whole city said? They said, "Gold digger." They said, "Look at that girl, 19, marrying that old man for his billions, shameless, greedy." They saw a young woman marry a rich old man, and they wrote the story they always write, the lazy, cruel story, never once asking what gun had been held to her family's head. She bore their contempt in silence, because to explain would have shamed her father further. She let the whole world call her greedy to protect the very people she had sold her youth to save. There was a moment on the wedding day, my people, that tells you everything about that girl. In a side room, before the ceremony, her father found her, this gentle, broken man who knew exactly what his daughter was doing and why, and could not stop it, and could barely stand to look at her in that dress, bought with the price of her own life. He tried to speak, to say something, to apologize, to forbid it even now, and no words came, only tears, the terrible silent tears of a father who has failed to protect his child and knows it. And Amara, 19 years old, on the worst morning of her life, took her weeping father's face in her 2 hands, the way a mother calms a frightened child, and she smiled at him, smiled, my people, and she said, "Papa, look at me. You did not do this. He did this, and you are not losing me. You are keeping everyone. Mama will sleep in her own bed tonight. The little ones will finish school. That is not a tragedy, Papa. That is a daughter doing what a daughter is for. Now dry your face and walk me out there with your head high, because I will not have them see you cry." And she walked into that marriage comforting the very people she was breaking her own heart to save. Remember that girl, my people. Remember the strength of her, because the man who bought her had no idea what he had actually brought into his house. If you have ever made a sacrifice so total that the world mistook it for selfishness, if you have ever been called greedy for the most generous thing you ever did, type "she never chose him" in the comments, because Amara never chose that man for 1 single second, and the cruelty of being judged for your deepest sacrifice is a wound this story is about to answer. So now you understand the girl on the edge of the bed. Now let me tell you what the old woman in the doorway had come to say. Nneka sat down beside the trembling girl, my people, and she did not waste the little time they had. "Everything that was done to you," she said, "was done to me 30 years ago. My father did not owe him money. With me it was a different snare, a false promise of a scholarship, a debt of gratitude he engineered. But the shape of it was the same. He does not court women, child. He acquires them. He finds a young girl bound to her family by love, and he makes that love into a chain, and he uses the chain to pull her onto this bed. I was 19. I thought I was the great love of a great man's life. I was an acquisition, and I will tell you exactly what happens next, because I lived every year of it, and you deserve to know the road before you walk it." And she told her. She told her how the young wife is adored, at first, paraded, jeweled, shown off, made to feel chosen, special, elevated above her poor origins, and how, slowly, the adoration becomes ownership. How the world she came from is closed off, old friends discouraged, her family kept at a polite distance, her movements watched, her money controlled, until she is entirely enclosed inside his world, with no door out that he does not hold the key to. And then, the part that made Amara go cold, how, when the wife begins to age, when a fresher younger girl catches his eye, the old wife is simply set aside. Not divorced usually. Divorce is public, messy, gives a woman rights, just erased, moved to a far wing or a distant house, declared unwell, resting, retired from public life. Her name quietly removed from the story, and a new 19-year-old brought to this same bed, told the same things, while the discarded one lives on as a ghost in the corners of his empire, neither wife nor free. And then, my people, Nneka did a thing that broke the girl's heart open. She reached into the folds of her wrapper and drew out something she had carried up those stairs, an old photograph, cracked and soft with 30 years of handling. She held it to the lamplight, and Amara looked and felt the floor tilt beneath her. Because it was a wedding photograph of a girl of 19, terrified and lovely, sitting on the edge of this very bed, in a dress almost exactly like the one Amara was wearing at that moment. "That is me," Nneka said quietly. On my first night in this room 30 years ago, I keep it to remind myself that I was real, that I was young once and hopeful, and that it was not a dream I imagined in a locked wing. Look at her, Amara, look at her face, and now look at your own in that mirror across the room. And Amara looked from the photograph to the great gilded mirror and back, and understood, with a horror that went all the way to the bone, that she was looking at the same girl, 30 years apart, the same trap, the same bed, the same dress, the same frightened hope, and that unless something changed tonight, she was also looking at her own future, an old woman in a forgotten wing, holding a cracked photograph, trying to remember she had ever been real. "I am not the only one before you, child," Nneka said. "That is what I climbed these stairs at midnight to tell you. There have been others between me and you, a whole line of us, girls he bought, used, and shelved, scattered through his houses and his history like furniture he no longer sits on. He told you I was dead. He tells each new wife that the ones before are dead, or gone or mad, because his whole power, Amara, his entire 30-year machine, depends on one thing above all others, that we never, ever meet, that we never sit on this bed together, as you and I are sitting now, that we go to our graves, each believing we were the only one, each hating the others as rivals, each alone." She took the girl's hand. "He has spent 30 years making certain the women he ruined would never look each other in the eye, and tonight I decided that ends. I opened the door. If two women who were taught to be enemies have ever chosen, instead, to truly see each other, to sit down together and compare their wounds and discover the same hand had made them all, type, 'She opened the door' in the comments, because that open door, my people, is the most dangerous thing that had happened to Chief Obiora in 30 years, and he was downstairs pouring himself a drink, and he did not feel it yet. Now, my people, let me tell you about the man, so you understand the full shape of what these two women were sitting inside. Chief Obiora was, to the world, a magnificent man, rich beyond counting, charming, cultured, generous in public, a giver to churches and charities, a shaker of important hands, a face in the newspapers under words like philanthropist and titan. No one who met him at a gala would ever have believed what he was in the private dark of his own houses. And that gap, my people, that enormous gap between the public saint and the private predator, was not an accident, it was his armor. Who would believe a 19-year-old girl over a beloved billionaire chief? Who would take the word of a greedy young wife, or a mad old one, against a titan of industry? His reputation was not just his vanity. It was the wall that kept his victims silent, because they knew no one would believe them, and he knew it too, and he built that wall higher every year with every donation and every handshake. And here is the first deep truth of him, my people, the engine under everything. Chief Obiora did not collect young wives because he loved women. He collected them because he despised them, and because he was terrified of them, and the only way he could feel safe with a woman was to own one so completely, so young, so poor, so bound by debt and gratitude and isolation that she could never ever have real power over him, never leave him, never judge him, never see him clearly. He did not want a wife. He wanted a mirror that could only show him flattering things. And the moment a woman aged into a person, into someone with her own eyes, her own opinions, her own gathering strength, he could not bear her, and he shelved her and bought a younger mirror. His billions had bought him everything a man can buy, and the one thing he could not buy, and most desperately wanted, was to be truly loved by a woman who was free to also not love him, so he made sure none of them were ever free. And in doing so he made sure none of them ever truly loved him. He was, under all the gold, the loneliest man in that city, and he had built the loneliness himself, brick by brick, wife by wife. You could see it, my people, in the smallest things, in how he owned. The morning after the wedding, he came to Amara, not as a husband greets a bride, but as a man inspects a purchase. He looked her over. He told her which of her own expressions displeased him, and which he would permit. He informed her pleasantly that her mother could visit once a month and no more, that her old friends from the poor quarter were not suitable now, that the household staff would inform him of how she spent her hours and her allowance. He said it all gently, smiling as a kindness, and that was the most chilling part, my people, that he genuinely believed it was love. He did not know the difference between loving a person and owning one. Somewhere long ago the two had fused in him, and now he could only love what he could completely control, and the moment a thing could not be controlled, he ceased to feel anything for it but fear. He was building Amara's cage in front of her on the very first morning, humming while he did it, calling it care. And Amara, who had a mother who loved her freely, and a father who wept because he could not command her, knew exactly what she was looking at, and knew that whatever this was, it was the opposite of the love she had grown up inside. So there they sat, the old ghost and the new bride. And in the few hours of that first night, my people, a thing was born that 30 years of Chief Obiora's careful cruelty had never once allowed. Not rivalry, but recognition. Two women looking at each other and seeing not an enemy, but a mirror of their own wound. Nneka looked at Amara and saw the terrified girl she herself had been. Amara looked at Nneka and saw the erased woman she herself would become, and between them, in that recognition, something turned. Fear became something else. Grief became something else. It became resolve. "I did not climb these stairs only to warn you," Nneka told her at last. "I could have warned you and told you to run, and you would have run, and he would simply have bought another girl next month, and it would all go on. I am too old and too tired for that. I climbed these stairs because in 30 years you are the first new wife I have reached before he closed the walls around her, and because I have spent those 30 years quietly in my forgotten wing, doing the one thing a ghost can do that the living cannot, watching, remembering, keeping." And she told Amara what she had kept. 30 years of it, the documents, because a wife shelved and ignored in a quiet corner of a great house sees everything and is watched by no one, the paper trail of the manufactured debts, the ruined families, the pattern repeated across decades, the names and the whereabouts of the other discarded wives, the whole scattered line of them, each hidden in her own lonely corner, each believing herself the only one. Nneka had been assembling the truth for 30 years, my people patiently, hopelessly, waiting for one thing, a new wife who, instead of hating her as a rival, would sit down and listen. And now, at last, that wife had come. This is the second turn of the story, my people, and it is the one Chief Obiora built with his own hands and never saw coming, because it came from the exact place he was most certain was safe. His whole power rested on keeping his women isolated and turned against each other. It had worked for 30 years. It was working, he believed, right now, upstairs. He had no idea that the two things he was most sure of, that his first wife was a broken, harmless ghost, and that his new wife was an ignorant, greedy girl, had just sat down together on the marriage bed and become, in a single night, the most dangerous alliance in the country. Because Nneka had the evidence and the memory, and Amara had what Nneka had lost 30 years ago and could not get back, youth and fury, and a family still worth fighting for, and nothing left to be afraid of, because the worst thing, the marriage itself, had already happened, and so they did not run. Running would have saved two women. They chose to do something harder and greater, to stay, briefly, and end it, for all of them. I want you to sit with the courage of that choice, my people, because it was not small. That first night, Nneka gave Amara the truth and then gave her the door, literally. "You can leave right now," the old woman told her. "I will show you the way out that he does not watch. Go home, tell no one, and in a month this will be someone else's nightmare and not yours. No one would blame you. You are 19, and you have already given enough." And Amara sat with that offer, my people, freedom, tonight, clean and safe, and then she thought of the cracked photograph, and the girl of 19 in it, and the woman that girl had become in a locked wing, and she thought, if I run tonight I save only myself, and next month he buys another me, and it never, ever ends. And she looked at Nneka and said, "You waited 30 years for a new wife who would stay and help you finish it. I am not going to be one more woman who runs and leaves you alone with it. I will stay. We end him, together." A 19-year-old girl, who had already sacrificed everything once, chose to sacrifice her own easy escape a second time, to stay in the lion's house a little longer, so that no girl would ever be brought to it again. That, my people, is not the choice of a gold digger. That is the choice of a hero. And the whole city had called her greedy. Over the weeks that followed, my people, while Chief Obiora believed he was breaking in a docile new bride, that new bride and that dead first wife were quietly, carefully doing their work. They found the others, one by one, the scattered, discarded wives, a woman running a small shop in another city, a woman living with her sister, a woman half mad with the loneliness of 30 years in a locked wing, each of whom had believed for decades that she was the only one, that her ruin was her private shame. Each of them was reached gently by 2 women who said the words that broke 30 years of silence. You were not the only one. It was not your fault, and we are not enemies. There was one, my people, that Amara never forgot. A woman named Ijoma, who had been the wife before Nneka, the oldest of them all, 40 years discarded, living in a small barred room in a far house, tended by paid strangers, declared long ago to be unwell. When Amara and Nneka came to her, she cowered at first, because in 40 years the only visitors she had known were her keepers, and she had been told so many times that she was mad that she had half come to believe it. And Nneka knelt in front of her, this old woman, and took her hands and said, Ijoma, you are not mad. You were never mad. You were young and poor, and he trapped you exactly as he trapped me, exactly as he trapped this girl beside me. 40 years they have told you it was your fault and your madness. It was neither. It was his. And my people, they watched a light come back on in a face that had been dark for 40 years, watched a woman weep not from grief, but from the unbearable relief of being believed, at last, after 4 decades of solitary shame. That, more than any document, more than any headline, was the true victory of this story. Not the fall of a rich man, but the moment a woman locked in the dark for 40 years finally heard another woman say, "It was not your fault, and you were never alone." Do you know what happens, my people, when a man's whole power is built on his victims never meeting, and then they meet? His power does not crack. It shatters all at once like a dropped glass, and it shattered. The evidence Nneka had kept, joined to the voices of a dozen women who had each thought herself alone, joined to the courage of a 19-year-old with nothing left to lose, it came down on Chief Obiora like a mountain. The manufactured debts, exposed, unraveled, which meant, my people, that the debt that had bought Amara was itself a fraud, void, gone, and her family was free, her sacrifice redeemed without her having to remain in the fire one more day. The pattern of ruined families became a public thing in the newspapers that had once called him a philanthropist. The beloved Titan became, in a single season, the thing he had spent his life terrified of being seen as, and the wall of reputation that had kept his victims silent for 30 years fell on him and buried him. If you understand that the oldest weapon a powerful man has is to make women fight each other over him, and that his power ends the very instant they stop fighting and start seeing each other, type, "They stopped fighting" in the comments, because that, my people, is the whole secret of this story, and it is a key that unlocks far more than one man's mansion. Now, my people, here is what these women did, and did not do, and it is the measure of them. They did not, in the end, need to destroy Chief Obiora with their own hands. His own works destroyed him. The law took an interest in a lifetime of fraud. The society that had crowned him dropped him. His empire, built on manufactured misery, came apart in the daylight. And the man who had spent 30 years making certain that no woman in his life would ever be free to leave him discovered, at the end, that every single one of them was leaving him at once, and that there was no one, not one soul in all his gilded houses, who loved him enough to stay. He got, at last, exactly what he had built, to be alone. The richest, most powerful, most thoroughly abandoned man in the city, rattling around a mansion full of rooms he had filled with wives, and emptied of them one by one, with no mirror left to flatter him, and no one left to own. That was his justice, my people, and no court could have designed it. The loneliness he had manufactured for others closed over his own head at last, and Amara? The girl the whole city called a gold digger walked away from that mansion and did not take his billions. She took only what freed her family, the voiding of the fraud, her father's name restored, and not 1 naira more, because she had never wanted his money, and to take it now would have made the city's lie true at last, and she would not give them that. She walked out as she had walked in, with nothing but herself, only now she walked out free. But here, my people, is the thing that undoes me, the unexpected grace at the end of it all. Amara and Nneka, the old wife and the young one, the 2 women a lifetime apart whom Chief Obiora had counted on to hate each other, they did not part when it was over. They had become, in that first terrible midnight and all the hard nights after, something the chief had never allowed either of them to have. Nneka had married at 19 and lost the daughter she never got to raise to a husband who owned her every hour. Amara had married at 19 and lost the mother's guidance a girl needs to a husband who cut her off from everyone. And they found in each other, my people, exactly the thing the man had stolen from them both. Nneka became the mother Amara's stolen years had cost her. Amara became the daughter Nneka's stolen years had denied her. The rivalry a powerful man had engineered between them turned in his defeat into the deepest bond either of them ever knew. He had put 2 women in the same trap 30 years apart, certain they would tear each other apart, and instead they walked out of it holding each other up and lived the rest of their lives as family, and spent those lives quietly, finding other trapped women and opening their doors. Because that became their work, my people, the 2 of them together, the old woman and the young one. They knew better than anyone alive the sound of a key turning in a lonely woman's lock, and they went year after year and they turned those keys the other way. However many doors Chief Obiora had closed in 30 years, 2 of his own wives spent the rest of their lives opening them. And years later, my people, there was a night that closed the circle. An old woman and a woman no longer quite so young climbed the stairs of another rich man's house in another city to another great bedroom where another frightened 19-year-old sat on the edge of another enormous bed in her wedding clothes, too afraid to move, and the door opened. And the girl's heart slammed, and she opened her mouth to scream, and Amara. I older now lifted one gentle hand exactly as Nneka had once lifted hers and said, "Do not scream. We are not here to hurt you. Sit down, child. Before he comes back, there are things you need to know, because once, a long time ago, a woman opened a door for me on the worst night of my life, and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Now let me do the same for you." Nneka stood beside her in that doorway, very old now and smiling. The door that was opened for them, they had spent their whole lives opening for others. That, my people, is how you defeat a man who closes doors. You do not merely open your own. You open every door you can find for the rest of your days, until closing them stops working for anyone, anywhere. If this story reached somewhere real in you tonight, if you have ever been judged as greedy for your deepest sacrifice, or been made to see another woman as your enemy when she was your sister all along, or been trapped by someone who made your love for your family into a chain, then do not leave this family without joining it first. Subscribe now so the next story finds you the very night it lands, and tell me, in the comments, what city, what country is this story reaching you in tonight? From Lagos to London, from Accra to Atlanta, from Nairobi to New York. I want to see just how far this one has traveled. And do not go yet, because there is already another story waiting for you, right there on your screen. Another soul someone tried to cage, another truth that opened a door in the dark. Because here is the truth I want you to carry home with you tonight, longer than any name in this story. The most powerful men who ever cage a woman have only one real trick, and it is very old. They make her believe that the other women are her rivals, that they must compete and suspect and hate one another, because a powerful man's greatest fear is the day 2 women he has wronged sit down together and simply compare notes. Everything he builds depends on keeping them apart and turned against each other, and so the most revolutionary thing a woman can do, my people, is refuse. To look at the woman she was told to see as an enemy, the first wife, the new wife, the rival, the other, and to see instead a sister carrying the same wound. When women stop fighting each other over the man who wronged them all and turn together to face him, no wall of money or reputation on this earth can stand. And the door that opens at midnight, the one you were taught to fear. Sometimes, my people, it is not your rival come to destroy you. It is your rescue, come at last to set you free. Until next time, my people. When another woman is placed before you as your enemy, look again, and look closely, for she may be your sister in a wound you share. Never let anyone make your love for your family into a chain to lead you, and remember always that the loneliest man in any city is so often the one who owns the most and is loved by no one, because a heart, unlike a wife, is the one thing that can never, ever be bought and never, ever be owned. He had houses without number and could not fill one of them with love, because love is the one door that opens only from the inside, and he had spent his whole life learning to lock doors and never once learned how to knock. Sleep well tonight, my people, and if a door opens for you in the dark, look before you fear it. It may be your rescue, come at last.